So today we will start the first war of independence 1857. Okay. The process of British conquest of India, which began from mid 18th century means it is around 1750. Remember that. And the subsequent consolidation of British rule was resented by the Indians. So Indians were not at all happy with the British rule. So the resentment was among all the sections of Indian society: kings, queens, peasants, landlords, tribals, soldiers. Hardly a year passed till 1857 when some part of the country or the other did not rise in revolts against the policies and actions of the British that harmed their interest and went against their sentiments of India. So some part did not rise in revolt, but scatteredly, means in different groups, different small areas, the revolt had already begun. But this in the initial stage, in the beginning stage, these small individual complaints did not appeal to the British, because if a protest is made means through a mass of people, that is appealing, that is effective. But if it is made only individual, only one or two, 3 or 4 people, then it is not so much effective. Understood? Okay. So nonetheless, this revolts established a local tradition of struggle against the foreign rule. So the revolt has emerged locally. This resentment to the British rule culminated in the first war of independence in 1857. So it was first time this resentment took a turn in the actually it got an outburst through the first war of independence in 1857, in which millions of peasants, artisans and soldiers participated. It shook the British government to its very foundation. Actually the British foundations were shaken. Okay. Now, causes of the first war of independence. The first 100 years of the British rule in India, that is from 1757 to 1857, were marked by British conquests. So conquest means what? British were means annexing every state, okay, and one by one bringing every state under their control, okay, and rapid expansion of their dominion in India. So slowly they were capturing the whole of India. The combined effect of the British expansionist policies, economic exploitation and administrative changes adversely affected all segments of Indian society. The ruling classes were dispossessed of their power. The peasantry was deprived of its land rights. So the peasants who were working, they were not given proper land rights. The artisans lost their livelihood. So whatever occupations everyone was doing, that independence was lost. The middle and upper classes of Indian society, particularly in northern India, were annoyed. So they became angry because of their exclusion from the well-paid higher post in the administration. Suppose from the high military rank officers they were removed, means all Indians from the higher post were removed, like that. So men who followed cultural or religious activities like priests and scholars. Scholars means educationist, one who is specialized in education and all that, found themselves without income as they lost their patrons. So they also lost their livelihood. Indian rulers, princes and zamindars who had themselves lost their authority. Okay. So see, the military officers are working under another higher post military officers. So if the higher post is only gone, so the lower post military officers means already they are feeling very inconfident and they are also feeling very insecure. So they also actually they also lost their jobs. The company's Indian soldiers were discontent with their low salary. So they were given low salary and life was very harsh, ill-treated by British soldiers. Okay. So by 1857, conditions were ripe for a mass uprising. So it became so much severe that they had to uprise. They had to. Okay. And the accumulated grievances of the people burst forth in the form of the first war of independence. Remember, this first war of independence was later given the name. Okay, actually that time you can call as the Sepoy Mutiny. Okay, but later when historians describe this, they one of the historians called it the first war of independence. Okay, now what are the causes of this revolt? Okay, obviously there were some many reasons. Now what were the political reasons which antagonized the Indian rulers? Were the following: policy of expansion. Now what does the British do? See, so here short questions can come. How did the British establish their policy of expansion? You can have short questions like this. Or how did the policy of expansion lead to the revolt of 1857? Okay, the British policy of territorial expansion and gradual annexation of the native Indian states was one of the major grievances of the Indian rulers. So slowly they were annexing, bringing all the Indian states under their control. Ever since the Battle of Plassey, 1757, the historic Battle of Plassey, June 1757, the East India Company's territorial power increased rapidly. So after the 757 Battle of Plassey, the East India Company, that is obviously the British, their territorial power increased greatly. The British tried to expand their political power in India by 4 ways. First, by outright wars. So they started doing wars by the system of subsidiary alliance. I'll later explain you what is subsidiary alliance. By adopting the doctrine of lapse, this also I'll explain, and on the pretext of alleged misrule. So whatever ill treatment, whatever corruption means they could do, they have done on us. Okay, and that actually outraged the peoples by outright wars. See, one by one these points are explained. What is by outright wars? To expand the territorial power and to safeguard their economic and political interest, the British waged many wars against the Indian rulers of different states. So first of all, the Battle of Buxar in 1764 established the British as masters of Bengal, Bihar and Orissa. As a result of their success in Anglo-Mysore wars from 1767 to 1799, the East India Company annexed most of the territories of the Mysore state. After the Third Anglo-Maratha War from 1817 to 1818, the Peshwa's entire dominions and all Maratha territory north and south of the Narmada River were acquired by the British. The Punjab was annexed in 1849 after the Sikhs were defeated in the Second Anglo-Sikh War. From 1823 to 1856, the British further extended their empire by conquering Sindh. So ultimately they conquered Sindh, the territories of Assam, Arakan and Tenasserim and Pegu in Myanmar. Slowly by outraging wars, they annexed all these states. Now, second point is how did they expand again their territory? By subsidiary alliance. Now, what is subsidiary alliance? Short questions come. Some Indian states were brought under the British control without actually annexing them. Okay. So this was done by following the subsidiary alliance introduced by Lord Wellesley. Very important name with the spelling. Lord Wellesley. Okay. Subsidiary alliance was an agreement. What was it? Very important part. Subsidiary alliance was an agreement between the British East India Company and the Indian princely states, by virtue of which, means through which, the states lost their sovereignty to the British. Sovereignty means what? The power of a ruler to rule independently without any outside interference. So previously the Indian rulers were ruling. Okay. Means no foreign power will interfere with that. But now the British has come to interfere with the Indian rulers. Okay. Under this system, the Indian rulers who agreed to the subsidiary alliance, so the states who the prince of the states who agreed the subsidiary alliance actually accepted the British as the supreme power. So this was the first point, subsidiary alliance, and second point is that they surrendered their foreign relations to the East India Company and agreed that they would not enter into any alliance with any other power and would not wage wars. Okay. So they will not enter into any other foreign relations. Okay. Third point, accepted a British resident at their headquarters. So now there will be a British resident, just, to spy on, just acting like a spy. Means so that they can keep an eye on whatever the Indians are doing. Very annoying and irritating also. And agreed not to employ any European in their service without consulting the company. Okay. So also they can't employ any European in the service without consulting the English East India Company. Also they agreed to maintain the British troops at their own cost. See, our state, our rulers, they had to maintain the British. We will maintain the troops of other people's countries. So irritating it is. So they agreed to maintain British troops at their own cost. Okay, so we will bear the cost of the British troops. Troops means the British soldiers. Virtually lost independence. So doing this type of things means actually losing your own independence. Okay, where you can't work independently, that means you are losing your independence. Very important, annexation means one important name very much comes, that is the annexation of Awadh. The kingdom of Awadh or Awadh was the first to enter into an alliance like this through the Treaty of Allahabad in 1765, by which the company undertook to defend the frontiers of Awadh under condition that the Nawab of Awadh would pay for the expenses of such defense. So British would give the defense and in return the Indian rulers will pay for it. Just think of it, so irritating. So however, Awadh was annexed on the pretext of misrule in 1856. So ultimately Indians were only blamed that it was being misruled, so Awadh was annexed. Such a reason. The other states which accepted the subsidiary alliance were the Nizam of Hyderabad, the ruler of Mysore, the Raja of Tanjore, the Sindhia and the Rajput states of Jodhpur, Jaipur, Macheri, Bundi and the ruler of Bharatpur. Very sad. By using the doctrine of lapse, another important policy of the British. Now this was done by Lord Dalhousie. Famous place in Kolkata, Dalhousie. Lord Dalhousie. It was the then Governor General of India, annexed many Indian states to the company using the doctrine of lapse. Now what was the doctrine of lapse? So according to this doctrine, if an Indian ruler died without a male heir, his kingdom would lapse. That is, it would come under the company's territory in India. So if a ruler had no male successor, no male heir, okay, the state would immediately lapse. The kingdom would lapse. That means it would come under the rule of the English East India Company. See the example given of doctrine of lapse here. When the ruler of Jhansi died in 1853, leaving no natural heir, because they had Rani Lakshmi Bai did not have her own son. Okay, at that time, the widowed Rani was pensioned. Okay, she was pensioned, and their adopted son Anand Rao was not recognized as a lawful successor to the throne. So still they adopted a son so that the state is not lost in the hands of the British, but still it didn't work. Okay, who was the father of Anand Rao? It is Gangadhar Rao, Rani Lakshmi Bai's husband. The other prominent states which were annexed by applying this doctrine were Satara, Jaipur, Sambalpur, Udaipur, Nagpur. The principle of lapse was also applied to take away the titles and pensions of the rulers of some states. So whatever titles they had, like the Peshwa, Bahadur. So these titles were taken away. Okay, and whatever pensions some people were getting, that were also taken away. So they did whatever they like. Okay. Regal titles of the Nawabs of Carnatic and Tanjore were taken away. This caused discontent among the rulers as well as among the believed that their states were annexed not by the application of doctrine of lapse, but by the lapse of all morals on the part of the British. Okay, so actually the British, these things were done means losing all morality. Of course you can understand this, there is no morality in this. Now on the pretext of alleged misrule, my god, now they give the allegation of that the Indians were misruling their own states. So in 1856 Lord Dalhousie annexed Awadh to the company's dominions on the pretext of alleged misrule. He declared that Awadh was being misgoverned and British rule was needed to ensure proper administration. Our country, they are giving advice. So irritating it is. So Lord Dalhousie justified the annexation of Awadh on the pretext of the good of the governed. Good of the governed means the people. Who is being governed? The people. So good of the governed means for the benefit of the people, as if they are taking over the charge of the state. But it is not so. This is the policy. This is the politics going on. Okay. Happening something else, thinking something else, doing something else. So on the contrary, the people of Awadh had to face more hardships. What were the difficulties faced by the people of Awadh? They had to pay higher land revenue, means land tax was increased, and additional tax on food, house and ferries. Ferries means goods. That also increased. The dissolution of the Nawab of Awadh's army and administration threw thousands of nobles, officials and soldiers out of jobs. So all the official post, military post, okay, the Nawab's army, everything was totally dissolved. So ultimately what? The Nawab was disrespected. Okay. The British confiscated the estates of the talukdars or zamindars. The dispossessed talukdars became the opponents of the British rule. So all the lands of the zamindars, okay, Bengal had lots of zamindars at that time, okay, not only Bengal but other states also, zamindars, so all the states were just taken from them. Obviously that would create rage among them. The company's sepoys means soldiers, of whom 75,000 were from Awadh, were the worst affected. These soldiers had helped the British to conquer the rest of India. So once they only had helped to conquer the rest of India, but now they are thrown out by them. So this is the politics. But they resented the fact that their homelands had come under foreign rule. So there, see, the British is such a clever policy. They are taking help of us in annexing our states and at last throwing us only. Okay, this is the policy. The annexation of Awadh also affected the soldiers' financial position. So ultimately, if the soldiers lose their jobs, obviously they will be weak very financially. They had to pay higher taxes on the land their families held in Awadh. Obviously, everyone has a family, so land tax was not exempted. They had to give the land tax. Enraged by the humiliating way in which the Nawab of Awadh was deposed, the people of Awadh joined the uprising that broke in 1857. So whatever ill treatments they got, that only led to the outrageous nature of the people of the India, of people of Awadh. Awadh played a major role in the uprising of 1857. So these were the points why actually the revolt took place from Awadh initially. Disrespect shown to Bahadur Shah. Okay. So Bahadur Shah Zafar, you know, the last Mughal ruler, was under the protection of the company and received a pension from the British. So the British told, okay, I am giving you certain pension amount, you stay like you are, and the entire domain, entire state would come under my rule. You be happy with the pension, like that. The name of the Mughal king was removed from the coins minted by the company. Can you imagine? Our land, our country, our coin, our imprints, they are removing it. Lord Dalhousie announced that successors of Bahadur Shah Zafar would not be permitted to use the Red Fort as their palace. So embarrassing. They were required to shift to a place near the Qutub Minar. So their place was also shifted. In 1856, Lord Canning announced that after the death of Bahadur Shah, his successors will not be allowed to use the imperial titles, okay, like the Bahadur, imperial royal title with their names, okay, and would be known as mere princes, means only prince would be used before their names. Prince Akbar, Prince, say suppose Alamgir, like that. Prince Shah, like that, just like that. No Bahadur Shah. This decision of the British hurt the feelings of the Muslims. Naturally, the Muslim rulers, Mughal rulers, they were hurt greatly. Consequently, Zinat Mahal, the wife of Bahadur Shah, began plotting against them. Okay. So now some queens of Mughal kings, so they actually, some were very outrageous. Okay. Treatment given to Nana Sahib. Now Nana Sahib was the adopted son of Bajirao II, Peshwa Bajirao II, last Peshwa. The British refused to grant Nana Sahib the pension they were paying to Bajirao II. So the son will not be given any pension. Okay. Nana Sahib was actually, what happens, the father's state, son will become the successor and rule it. Now if father is the last pension person and son also doesn't get the state, then how will the son run his family? So actually, Nana Sahib was forced to live at Kanpur, far away from his family seat at Pune. Pune is in Maharashtra. Okay. This was widely resented in the Maratha region. Nana Sahib had inherited wealth from the former Peshwa. Former Peshwa means Peshwa, his father, Peshwa Bajirao II, which utilized in sending emissaries to different parts of the country for generating awareness among the Indians about the British policies. So Nana Sahib was aware all about the actual intentions of the British, what they were trying to do. Nana Sahib also travelled between Delhi and Lucknow to gather support for the movement. So now he has already understood the British, what actually they were planning. The other Indian rulers who were not adversely affected also become suspicious of their future. Now naturally, if a person before me is given an ill treatment, I can also get the same anytime. So naturally they were suspicious now about the British. Absentee sovereignty of the British. This is the fourth point. Absentee sovereignty of the British means that India was being ruled by the British government from England at a distance of thousands of miles, and this was resented by the Indians. The earlier, so where they live, over the seas, across the seas, okay, and from there they are ruling India. The earlier rulers like the Mughals who had conquered India had in course of time settled in India. So whatever Mughal empires had conquered India, now they had settled in India. The revenues they collected from the Indians were spent in India only. But revenues means the taxes. But in the case of Britain, the Indians felt that they were being ruled from England. Okay. And India's wealth was being drained to England. So whatever, they actually looted India's resources, okay, and not utilized for their welfare. So welfare was just stupid reason to give. Socio-religious causes. There's the social and religious causes. The British government's attempt to interfere in the social and religious life of the Indians led to the widespread fear among the masses. Now they also interfered between the social norms of our Indian society. Interference with social customs. Some of the social reforms introduced by the British in India were aimed at improving the conditions of the people. However, while introducing such reforms, the feelings of the people were not taken into consideration. While they were introducing new reforms, new changes in society, okay, the feelings of the Indians were not given any priority. The result was that the reforms like the abolition of sati. Now we think sati was abolished is good, but at that time those people, they didn't think that abolition of sati was good. It was done in 1829. The introduction of the Widow Remarriage Act in 1856 and the opening of Western education to girls were not welcomed by the masses. So these are actually the good points of the British rule, but at that time the Indian people didn't understand this. They thought everything was being done wrong. Apprehension about modern innovation. People were suspicious of the introduction of modern innovations like railway and telegraph. There were rumors like telegraph poles were erected to hang those who were against the British rule. So whoever would go against the British, they would be hanged in the telegraph poles. Similarly, Orthodox Indians noted that, Orthodox means, very coming from very conservative background. Orthodox Indians noted that in the railway compartments, the higher caste and the lower caste were made to sit side by side. Okay, they believed that the British had introduced such practices to defy their caste and religion. Now in India there was age-old practice of caste system. Okay, Brahmin, Kshatriya, these all things, Kshatriya, Shudras, Brahmanas, all these things. So now when the British came, they actually made everyone sit side by side in the railway coaches. Now, policy of racial discrimination. The British officers were rude and arrogant towards the Indians. Very rude. They believed that they were superior to Indians and followed a policy of contempt towards the Indians. They dubbed the Muslims as cruel and unfaithful. Some European officers were Some European officers ill-treated and insulted the Indians. Such acts of unjust discrimination alienated the British from the Indian masses. So alienated the British from Indian masses means that the British were being awed gradually from the Indian masses because they are behaving in such a way, okay, ill-treating the Indians. Corruption in administration. What is the corruption? The police and petty officials, means holding small posts, were corrupt. The rich got away with crime. Very important. It's very irritating, this thing. If any rich person does wrong thing, they were given discount. But the common man was looted, oppressed and tortured. Okay. Oppression of the poor. The complex judicial system enabled the rich to oppress the poor. Flogging, torture, imprisonment, they were jailed. Of cultivators for their inability to pay arrears of rent, land revenue and interest on debt were quite common. So whatever money they couldn't receive from the Indians, based on that torture was given to the Indians. Thus the growing poverty, so naturally the people will turn into, very soon they would turn into like beggars. The growing poverty made the poor desperate and led them to join a general uprising in the hope of improving their lot. Okay, they hope that they would improve their situation would improve if they protest. Activities of the missionaries. The British were different from Indians in race, religion and sentiments. In the 18th century, the British showed a friendly attitude towards Indian religions. They had no particular zeal for their own religion, and the company even acted as a trustee of some Hindu temples. However, in the 19th century, this attitude underwent a change. The British began to interfere with the local religious and social customs. They denounced idol worship. Very important point of this paragraph. If you really explain this heading under the socio-religious causes question, then you have to give this sentence. They denounced idol worship. That means idols could not be worshipped, and dubbed local beliefs as ignorance. Whatever local beliefs, religious beliefs the people had, totally they were ignored. It's no priority. After 1813, there was an increase both in the numbers and activities of the Christian missionaries. The Indians thought that the government was supporting missionaries who would convert them to a Christian, like missionary schools. Missionary schools means mostly they're actually run by Christians. So Indians thought that British are trying to convert our religion into Christians. That was also another fear. Fear regarding Western education. The Western system of education was introduced in a number of schools. In 1829, the Bengal government established an English class in the Calcutta Madrasa, which was a Muslim institution. Later, English classes were introduced in Benares Sanskrit College. The shifting of emphasis from Oriental learning. Oriental learning means It's generally, some shastras, all these means Oriental learning means whatever Indian system of learning. From that, it got converted to Western education, was not received well by the people, especially the Pandits and the Maulavis. Pandit means, talking about the Hindus, priests, and Maulavis means the Muslim priests, you can say. They saw in it an attempt to discourage traditional Islamic and Hindu studies. So, Pandits feared that Hindu studies would be lost, and Maulavis thought that Islamic studies were lost. People started suspecting that the aim of Western education was not to promote literature and science but to encourage their children to become Christians. So they understood that actually the aim was not to promote literature or any subject but to actually the conversion of religion. Taxing religious places. Religious sentiments of the Indians were hurt by the official policy of taxing lands belonging to people or belonging to temples and mosques. So religious places were also under tax control. Such lands had been exempted from taxation by previous Indian rulers. So Indian rulers who were previously ruling those temples and mosques, they were not taxed. Now they had to give tax from the temples and mosques also. The families dependent on these land began to propagate that the British were trying to undermine the religions of India. Actually, they were trying to dominate everything, even the religion. There will be no religion. They thought means they would lose their religion and all, whatever dharma. Law of property. The Religious Disabilities Act of 1850 changed the Hindu law of property. Okay. It enabled a convert from Hinduism to other religions to inherit the property of his father. The Hindus regarded this as an incentive to give up one's religious faith. So under the Religious Disabilities Act of 1850 changed the Hindu law of property. It enabled a convert from Hinduism to other religions to inherit the property of his father. So in order to inherit the property of father, you can also convert from Hinduism to any other religion. Okay. Now, if you do such conversion, the Hindus thought that they would actually lose their religious background, religious faith. Economic causes. Now, what were the monetary problems arising at that time? The most important reason for the popular discontent was the economic exploitation by the British. The economic exploitation took the following forms. Exploitation of economic resources. The British exploited the Indian resources for their own benefits. They made agricultural India an economic colony to serve the interests of the industrial England. Yeah, actually they wanted to turn the agricultural India into their own interest, land of their own interest. India was forced to export at cheaper rates, means we are incurring losses. Raw materials like raw cotton and raw silk that the British industries needed urgently. Plantation products like indigo, indigo means color, indigo plants like indigo and tea and food grains which were in short supply in Britain. So these products were exported to Britain. India was made to accept ready-made British goods either duty-free or at nominal duty rates. So whatever British goods would come to India, whatever foreign goods could come to India, that required no tax. That could come tax-free or at very nominal charges. While Indian products were subjected to high import duties in England. But if Indian products are going to England, then it would be charged. The Indian handmade goods were unable to compete with the cheaper machine-made British products. Indian products actually were far better than the British ones. So actually the British were doing profit and we were doing loss. This ruined the Indian industry, deprived the artisans of their income and reduced the avenues of employment for labor. So naturally if the industry is gone, then the labor, how would they run their families? On the other hand, export of raw material and food grain deprived India of her agricultural surplus and raise the price of raw materials. So if there is no production, obviously the demand will rise, and if there is no food, no surplus means stock, then obviously the prices of raw materials will go up. Thus people couldn't afford that, and that is how it changed in the nature of India's trade, became an instrument for exploiting India's resources. So this is how the British exploited Indian lands. The British built a huge empire comprising large areas of North America, Australia, New Zealand, Asia and Africa, as well as small parts of Central and South America. In fact, at its height in 1922, it constituted the largest empire the world had ever seen, covering around a quarter of Earth's lands surface, just imagine, and ruling over 458 million people. However, over the course of the 20th century, that means from 1900 to this period, 1947. Over the course of the 20th century, the British Empire started losing its colonies. So slowly, they again started losing the colonies as the Indians outraged. It so happened that after the First World War, that is 1914-1918, a feeling of nationalism swept the globe. The whole world, they became aware of their nation, whereby the countries ruled by the British started demanding independence. So everyone was seeking independence. Okay, not only India. We are only running Indian independence. Every country has their own independence story. Okay. Many of the North American colonies gained independence from Britain through victory in the American Revolutionary War, which ended in 1783. See, we have read in this chapter about India's first war of independence in 1857. Now think about the key differences and similarities between India's first war of independence in 1857 and the American Revolutionary War 1783. So this is just for information. Hardly chances are there that questions will come from here. Drain of wealth, the second economic cause. Till the Battle of Plassey 1757, the European traders, Britain is what? A part of Europe. So the European traders used to bring gold into India to buy Indian cotton and silk. However, after the conquest of Bengal, the British stopped getting gold into India. When they had already captured Bengal, now no need to bring gold into India. They began to purchase raw material for the industries in England from the surplus revenues of Bengal. So whatever tax they were collecting from Bengal, that was enough to get them, revenues for their own industries and profits from duty-free inland trade. So whatever they were profiting from the inland trade, that was enough to set up their own industries in their place, at their place. Thus began the process of plundering India's raw materials. Plundering means what? Looting. This is called looting. The transfer of wealth from India to England, for which India got no proportionate economic return, is called the drain of wealth. So India is getting no profit, only the raw materials are going out without any profit. The drain included the salaries. So see, the drain is just not they will take the salary. They are not taking the salary. They are depriving the Indians of the salary. That means that they are benefiting out of that. The drain included the salaries, incomes and savings of Englishmen, the British expenditure in India on the purchase of military goods. So in whatever way they could save. The intense power means the intense extent of saving. Whatever they could save. Office establishment, interest on debts. So whatever. Unnecessary expenditure on the army, etc. So from whatever they could collect revenue, they collected. Decay of cottage industries and handicrafts. So the small scale industries, cottage industries, handcrafts and all that also was gone. Heavy duties on Indian silk and cotton textiles in Britain destroyed Indian industries. On the other hand, British goods were imported into India at a nominal duty. So we Indians had to give charges for that when British goods came. By the middle of the 19th century, that is around 1850. Export of cotton and silk goods from India practically ceased. So by 1850, all the export of cotton and silk was stopped by India. The art of spinning and weaving, which for ages had given employment to thousands of artisans, now became extinct. So from where? From the ancient civilizations, spinning and weaving started. So long before. Okay. So now this all were extinct. Everyone was jobless. The misery of the artisans was further compounded by the disappearance of the traditional patrons and buyers, the princes, chieftains and zamindars. So all these posts now disappeared. Okay. Valuable posts. Economic decline of peasantry. Now the peasants were discontent with the official land revenue policy and the consequent loss of the land. In fact, it was the peasantry that bore the heavy burden of taxes to provide money for the trade of the company, for the cost of administration and the wars of British expansion in India. So peasantry only, they bore the heavy burden of taxes. Okay. For example, in Bengal, the land revenue was double the amount collected under the Mughals. So whatever the Mughals collected, if the Mughals collected 500 rupees, they collected 1000 rupees, like that. Not even a part of this revenue was spent on the development of agriculture or on the welfare of cultivator. So if the government is taking money, tax from the people, that means it will be spent on the welfare of the citizens, but it was not like that at all. Increase in the land revenue forced many peasants into indebtedness or into selling their lands. So if anyone could not pay tax, they were told, you sell your land and repay all the tax, and once you have no land, then no need to pay tax. Very easy. So the traditional zamindars were replaced by merchants and money lenders. Okay. Now merchants and money lenders came. Now when initially no one would sell his or her own land, okay, when they are unable to give taxes, now they will borrow from somebody else. From whom they will borrow? From merchant, from money lenders they will borrow. Okay. So and after that the money lenders took interest. Now see, understand the burden of the peasants and the Indians. These new landowners had no concern for the peasants. They were not at all worried. They pushed rents to exorbitant levels, means to any level they set the rents, and evicted their tenants in case of non-payment. So if they are not able to pay the pay the rent of that house, they would lose their rooms, lose their house. They will stay on the roads. British were not worried at all. The economic decline of the peasants affected cultivation and led to many famines. So if you are not stable economically, how will you run your livelihood? How will you do your business? So naturally they had to stop cultivation also, and ultimately famines. And famines, who were affected? The British who are there, they are not affected because their food are continuously coming from outside, or whatever productivity is being done from the Indian lands, that is being stored exclusively for the British. Then only the remaining is given to the Indians. Got it? So they are not suffering, we are suffering. Growing unemployment. The traditional rulers had given financial support to scholars, preachers and men of arts. So the artisans and scholars and preachers were given some financial support. The coming of the British led to the decline of such rulers, and gradually their patronage came to an end. But all the scholars, preachers, artisans, they lost their positions. Thus all those who depended on their patronage were impoverished. They totally were gone under poverty. When the native states were annexed to the British Dominion, thousands of soldiers and officials in administrative, military and judicial posts became unemployed. They lost their jobs because British policies excluded Indians from high post. Okay, so the British will not give job to any Indians. Okay, all these people, so this was a policy that we will not give you job, we will give force you to pay high taxes, so automatically you will not be able to, everyone knows that, and you will ultimately lead to starvation and death. All these people became bitter enemies of the British rule in India, so naturally they became enemy of the British. Inhuman treatment of indigo cultivators, very important. If you read the book called Nil Darpan by Dinabandhu Mitra, that book actually depicts, so what ill treatment they were given. Indigo trade was highly profitable to the British, but the conditions under which the peasants had to work were inhuman. So British were running in profit, but the peasants who were working for these indigo plantations, they were given very inhuman treatment. The peasants were forced to cultivate only indigo in the fields chosen by the British planters. So they will only cultivate indigo and not any other crop. If they planted anything else, their crops were destroyed, that means it was either burned or destroyed anyhow, and the cattle were carried off as punishment. Okay. Poverty and famines. Famine means, you understand? Lack of food, running of lack of food, no productivity of food. British economic exploitation, decay of indigenous industries. Indigenous means own, our means desi industries, means Swadeshi. Swadeshi industries means our Indian industries were all destroyed. High taxation, the drain of wealth, stagnation of agriculture, agriculture got stagnant, and exploitation of the poor peasants reduced the Indians to extreme poverty. Okay, so Indians, ultimately the economic condition was very bad. Famines ravaged the country in the second half of the 19th century, like around 1850. Bengal famine was there, 1870 at that time. There were 12 major and numerous minor famines between 1765 and 1857. The famines were the result of drought. Drought means lack of, no plants are there on the soil, means no water for crops, and totally, okay. Other natural calamities as well as bad administration. So no rains, ultimately climate also was responsible, but altogether it brought this famine. The British government did nothing to lessen people's misery. They did nothing. They will not bother. Decline of landed aristocracy. The landed aristocracy, which included the talukdars and the hereditary landlords, were deprived of their estates. So these talukdars, zamindars, okay, who owned actually acres of land, they were deprived of their estate. According to the provisions of the Inam Commission 1852, 20,000 estates were confiscated when the landlords failed to produce evidence like title deeds by which they held the land. So if you are not able to show that where is your proper official documents, they were confiscated. These confiscated lands were sold by public auction to the highest bidders. So Indian lands were auctioned, means auction, you understand that any highest price is set, some people are called who would buy the land, and suppose the price of the land, one people gives 1,000 rupees, another people gives 1,200, 1,300, like this it would rise, and 1,301, 1,302, 1,303. So if no one else tells, then 1,300 is finalized and the land is sold at rupees 1,300, just like that. Such estates were usually purchased by merchants and moneylenders. Now these merchants and moneylenders have had several rates of interest. So now they are full of money. So they actually purchased the lands, who did not understand the needs of the tenants and exploited them. This drove the landed aristocracy to poverty without benefiting the peasantry, which suffered under the weight of exorbitant land revenue. This all was due to the excess land revenue, land tax. Now what are the military causes? Several factors contributed to the change in the attitude of the Indian soldiers towards the company. This included the following. Ill treatment of Indian soldiers. The English East India Company established the British Empire in India with the help of Indian soldiers. Despite the fact that Indian soldiers were as efficient as their British counterparts, they were poorly paid. Payment was not good, ill-fed, ill treatment was given, and badly housed, given bad, locations to stay. British military authorities forbade the sepoys from wearing caste or sectarian marks, birds or turbans. So whatever religious symbols or signs people carry, like the Sikhs carry turbans, the Muslims have birds, so they could not keep these things, and they showed disregard for the sentiments of the sepoys. So they were not allowed to maintain all those caste marks. Okay. General Service Enlistment Act. According to traditional belief, it was a taboo for a Brahmin to cross the seas. It was believed that Brahmin will lose the religion if they cross overseas, or if they go overseas, travel overseas. The British Parliament passed the General Service Enlistment Act 1956, according to which Indian soldiers could be sent overseas on duty. But this act did not take into account the sentiment of the Indian soldiers. So this belief was not given any priority or any preference. The Brahmin soldiers, saw this as a danger to their caste. This led to a feeling of resentment among them. Larger proportion of Indians in the British army. Actually the Indians were not given any job. Obviously the British people will only be given job. The number of British troops in India was never very large, with the British in the ratio as low as 1 in 4,000. So 1:4,000 is the ratio of Indian to British people. Understand? Dalhousie had recommended that more British soldiers should be recruited in the army. This could not come through. Thus, it made it easier for the large number of Indian soldiers to take up arms against the British. So this has only forced the Indian soldiers to take up arms. Bleak prospects of promotions. All higher positions, in employment were reserved for the British. Okay, all the high posts, irrespective of the province, whatever good performance they do, they will not be given any higher post. The Indian soldiers previously who were occupying the higher positions in the armies of native princes cannot rise above the rank of Subedar. The future of the Indian soldiers was bleak without any chance of promotion. So there was no career perspective. Okay. Deprivation of allowances. The extension of British dominion in India adversely affected the service conditions of the sepoys. They were required to serve in areas away from their homes, so they were, their areas of duty were far away from their houses, and that also without any extra payment. You only think, if you are given a job of 8 hours, and if you are told to do every day 2 hours extra or 1 hour extra, will you feel good? Obviously not. And additional bhatta, that is foreign service allowance. So they were required to serve in areas away from their homes without any extra payment and additional bhatta. The Post Office Act of 1854 withdrew the privilege of free postage enjoyed by sepoys. Actually the military officials have lots of opportunities, lots of advantages they get, okay, over the normal people. But all these were taken away. Faulty distribution of troops. Places of strategic importance like Delhi and Allahabad had no British armies and were wholly held by the Indian soldiers. Besides, apart from that, England was engaged in several wars outside India. Example, the Persian-Iranian War, the Crimean War and the Chinese War. Indian soldiers had the feeling that the British were in difficulty and the safety of our Indian empire depended on them. So now they had understood that, okay, the British is busy doing something else, now we can easily revolt and get back our rights. They were therefore determined to strike at them at a suitable time. Okay, because unequal distribution of troops. Wherever there are disadvantage, the other people will take the advantage of that. Is here the Indians only. Poor performance of British troops. The British army suffered major reverses in the first Afghan war from 1838 to 42, in the Punjab wars 1845 to 49, and the Crimean war 1853 to 56. In 1855 to 56, the Santhal tribesmen of Bihar and Bengal, armed with axes and bows, rose up against the British, temporarily sweeping away the British rule from their area. Though the British suppressed the Santhal uprising, the disasters they suffered broke the myth that the British were invincible. Obviously, there is no logic to think that the superior power is the ultimate thing. Okay, anyone who tries can rise above the superior power. It further revealed to the Indian soldiers that the British army could be defeated by the determined Indian army. So the Indians now gained confidence. Okay. Lower salaries. The wages of Indian soldiers were inadequate to support their families. On the other hand, the British soldiers received more than 8 times salary of Indian soldiers. See the ratio. So they were given such a low treatment, low salary. Immediate cause, very, very important. Introduction of the Enfield rifle. Now this also actually comes under the military cause only, means in general, but in specially this is immediate cause. In 1856, the British authorities decided to place the old-fashioned musket called the Brown Bess by the new Enfield rifle. Now the new Enfield rifle actually was to bring the cartridge to the mouth and biting of the top greased paper with the teeth, and then only you can use it. But what was the cartridge now made of? In January 1857, there was a rumor in the Bengal regiments that the greased cartridge had the fat of cow or pig. Now, who are in the India maximum? In the Muslims or Hindus? The sepoys were convinced that the introduction of greased cartridges was a deliberate move to defile Hindu and Muslim religions, as the cow is sacred to the Hindus and the pig is a taboo to Muslims. Okay, the Muslims, Hindu worship the cows, and the Muslims don't have pork, so they were not convinced to use those greased cartridges. So both the Hindus and the Muslim soldiers refused to use these cartridges and staged an uprising when they were forced to use them. On February 26, 1857, the native infantry at Berhampur in Bengal refused to accept the cartridges given to them. The regiment was disbanded as a warning to other regiment. So that regiment of soldiers was disbanded. The sepoys feared loss of their caste and religion if they accepted the greased cartridges. As a result, Mangal Pandey, a sepoy, led an attack on the adjutant of the 34th Native Infantry at Barakpur on March 29, 1857. Very important date. Mangal Pandey was executed after a court martial for his fellow sepoys. He became a martyr. So he was killed. And main events. Okay. What are the events? Now I already told you that some local rebellions are already started. How the local rebellions are started, those portions now we will learn. News of the events in Bengal spread like a wildfire. On May 9, 85 sepoys refused to touch the cartridges. This is Begum Hazrat Mahal, Tatia Top, to touch the cartridges on the parade ground. They were sentenced to 10 years of rigorous imprisonment. My God. On May 10, all the sepoys at Meerut rushed to the jail and set free their comrades and other convicts. Okay. So naturally they want to free their own, countrymen. Events at Delhi. The soldiers from Meerut came to Delhi the next morning. They were joined by the local infantry. They seized the city and proclaimed the aged Mughal Emperor Bahadur Shah the Emperor of India. So whatever the British did, now they are again restoring the original forms. He was coerced to write letters to all chiefs and rulers of India, urging them to organize a confederacy of Indian states to fight against the British regime. Now Bahadur Shah Zafar was told, to unite the rest of India, all the rulers of India, and together they will rise against the British rule. In the process, the British lost Delhi. So this is how Delhi was lost from their control. Sir John Nicholson surrounded Delhi and after 4 months of attack captured Delhi. The old Emperor Bahadur Shah Zafar was found guilty of aiding the movement. As a punishment, his 2 sons were shot dead in front of him. He was sentenced to life imprisonment and deported to Yangon in Myanmar, where he died in 1862. See. So when Bahadur Shah Zafar was found that he is involved in this, means in bringing out this movement against the British gave a nice treatment. Imprisonment and sons are killed. Such inhuman treatment. Events at Lucknow. Begum Hazrat Mahal, the wife of the Nawab of Awadh, led the uprising at Lucknow on May 30, 1857. So, picture study you can get from here, Mangal Pandey. Very important. Okay. The city was recaptured by the British in March 1858. Begum Hazrat Mahal fled towards the Nepal frontier. So, who are leading the revolt from where? These names are important. Who is leading the revolt from Lucknow? Begum Hazrat Mahal. Short questions do come from here. Very important. MCQ, short question, whatever. Events at Kanpur. Nana Sahib led the struggle for independence at Kanpur. The British surrendered in June 1857. A large number of Englishmen, women and children were captured by an infuriated mob. Okay, so large group of Englishmen, women and children were captured by a huge crowd. The British defeated Nana Sahib in December 1857. Nana Sahib fled towards Nepal. His general Tatia Top escaped to Kalpi. Events in central India, Jhansi and Gwalior. The battle began at Jhansi early in June 1857. Sir Hugh Rose laid siege to the fortress of Jhansi in March 1858. Rani Lakshmi Bai resisted, but Jhansi was captured by the British when traitors opened the gates of the fortress for them. The Rani escaped from the fortress on the night of April 4, 1858 to join Tatia Top at Kalpi. The Rani died fighting the British on June 17, 1858 at Gwalior. When Rani actually died, let me tell you this, he told the Indians, whatever Indian soldiers or Indian officials she had with her, she told them that bury my body so that the British can't touch me. So much contempt she had for the British. Okay, that they should not touch her body. Okay. Tatia Top was betrayed by the Gwalior chief Man Singh and was hanged on April 18, 1859. So, given death. Tatia Top. Events at other centers. At Bareilly, Khan Bahadur, a descendant of the former ruler of Rohilkhand, took command of the movement. In Bihar, the struggle was led by Kanwar Singh, the Zamindar of Jagdishpur. He had been deprived of his estates by the British. At Faizabad, the leadership was taken by Maulvi Ahmadullah, who aroused the Muslim community against the British rule. So the places and the names are very important. Who led the revolt from where? Which place? Bengal, Rohilkhand, Bundelkhand, Central India, several parts of Bihar and East Punjab rose against the British policies. In several states in India, the rulers remained loyal to the British government, but their soldiers rose against the British. In most of these places, common people rose up in arms and fought with their axes and spears, bows and arrows. Now, what are the consequences or effects of the First War of Independence? Even though the uprising of 1857 was suppressed, it shook the British rule in India to its very foundation. It brought, actually they had got some shocks, aftermaths are there. It brought about far-reaching effects on Indian socio-political life. These were end of the company's rule. Very good news. The most significant result of the uprising of the 1857 was the end of the rule of the East India Company and assumption of the government of India directly by the Crown. This was done by the Government of India Act of 1858, which had the following provisions. It transferred the power to govern India from the English East India Company to the British Crown. The company's board of control and court of directors was established. A member of the British cabinet was appointed Secretary of State for India and made responsible for all matters related to the governance of India. He was given a council to advise him called the Indian Council. Thus the ultimate power over India remained with the British Parliament. So not totally handover was there to the India, but you can say partially. Actual governance was to be carried on as before by the Governor General, who was like the Lord Wellesley, Lord Canning, Lord Curzon, whoever doing means one by one. By the Governor General, who was also given the title of Viceroy, that is a personal representative of the Crown. This is important. Who is the Viceroy? Lord Canning was appointed as the first Viceroy under this Act. Very important. Appointments to the civil service were to be made by open competition under rules made by the Secretary of State. So now they could get jobs also. Queen Victoria's proclamation, very important. The Queen's proclamation incorporating the transfer of governance of English East India Company to the British Crown was made public at Allahabad on November 1, 1858. Where is Allahabad? UP, Central India. By Lord Canning, the first Viceroy of India. The proclamation promised that the government of India would, very, very, very important, the Queen's proclamation, 3 marks, 4 marks question can come from here. That the government of India would follow a policy of non-intervention in social and religious matters of Indians. That is, they would not interfere with the social and religious matters. Treat all subjects, means treat all people, Indians and Europeans, as equal. Education and ability would be the basis of all appointments. So, people would be given service based on their merit. The government of India would grant a general pardon to all those who had taken part in the war, except those who were found guilty of murder of British subjects. So whoever murdered the British, they will not be pardoned, but whoever had not whoever were not involved in any murder case, they will be pardoned. Okay? But the British also killed many people, but at that time, no justice. The government of India do its best to advance the industries in India, so they would look after the betterment of the industries, promote work of public utility in India so as to ensure the material as well as the moral progress of the people. End of Mughals and Peshwas. With the death of Bahadur Shah II, who was deported to Yangon, the Mughal dynasty came to an end. Very important. Nana Sahib, the last Peshwa, had taken an active part in the uprising and had fled to Nepal after the failure of the uprising. So the office of the Peshwa also came to an end. Thus ended two of the most important formidable foes. Foes means enemies of the British, the Marathas and the Mughals. Who is the Maratha? Nana Sahib, last Peshwa. Relations with princely states. The policy of annexation and doctrine of lapse were abandoned. So they were again taken away. Some of the Indian princes had remained loyal to British and had helped them in suppressing the uprising. See, when you lodge a complaint, you will not get all by your side. So some people will be there who will be against you. Okay. So naturally some Indians were there who were actually, oiling and buttering the British to ensure their own betterment, for their own, profits. They actually oiled them. Their loyalty was rewarded with the announcement that their right to adopt heirs would be respected. So only those people who helped the British in suppressing the revolt, they will be given the right to adopt heirs. and the integrity of the territories guaranteed against future annexation, and their territories will not be annexed. Okay. In 1876, Queen Victoria assumed the title of the Empress of the India. So she took the title the Empress of India. The Indian princes willingly became junior partners or agents of the British Crown because they were promised that they would continue as rulers of their states. Very important picture study, Queen Victoria. Policy of divide and rule. After 1858, the British continued their policy of divide and rule by turning the princes against the people. Okay, that is in the year 1905. By turning the princes against the people, province against province, caste against caste, group against group, and above all the Hindus against Muslims. They alienated the people from the rulers by giving them special protection and concessions. So if one section of the society is given special facilities, special amenities, obviously the other section will worry why we are not getting it, only they are getting it. So they will create a discrimination. A discrimination will be created. The government cleverly used the attractions of government service to create a split along religious lines among the educated Indians. The British also encouraged hatred and ill feeling among the Hindus and the Muslims so that they could never challenge the British Empire in India. So they always wanted to dominate Indians, be it Hindus, be it Muslims, whatever. Okay. So ultimately, if they are given the higher post, they are given the ultimate power, then what? The British will finally be removed, but they don't want that. Okay. Racial antagonism. The British believed that in the racial superiority, and they thought that a social distance was to be maintained to preserve the authority over the Indians. So don't think that they are means they are ready to mix with India just like their friends. No. Railway compartments, parks, hotels, clubs, etc. reserved for Europeans only were visible manifestations of this racialism. So only white people are allowed. Okay, not the black people. I mean the melanin people, means colored melanin, means people with melanin pigment are not allowed. Foreign policy. India's foreign policy was dictated by the interests of the British government. It fulfilled the two aims of the British: protection of its Indian empire. This is the one point. Expansion of British economic and commercial interest in Asia and Africa. This is the second point. Cost of implementation of these policies was borne by the Indians, but still, see, these are still the drawbacks. We have to bear the cost. For instance, India under the British had to wage wars with her neighbors like Nepal and Burma, Myanmar, in which Indian soldiers had to shed their blood, and the Indian taxpayers had to meet the heavy cost of the war. So Indian soldiers were losing their lives in order to fight against other countries, and also at the same time they had to, maybe their family members are paying tax for those things, okay, for the war. Increased racial bitterness. After the uprising of 1857, racial bitterness increased. The British dubbed all Indians as unworthy of trust and subjected them to insults and humiliation. So they insulted Indians like anything. The entire structure of Indian government was remodeled and based on the idea of a superior race. So again the Indian government structure was modified. Religious changes. The British rulers declared emphatically their policy of non-interference in the religious affairs, customs and traditions of the Indians. They will not interfere in anything, religious things. Changes in the army. The Indian army was reorganized after 1858 to prevent the reoccurrence of another uprising in the following manner, so that no future uprising can take place. What are the steps they took? So see, they also learned from their mistakes. The strength of European troops in India was increased. It was disproportionate. The soldiers thing. Ratio of European to Indian troops was fixed at 1:2. Bengal army, and 2:5 Madras and Bombay armies. Now they balanced it almost. Practically the same ratio was maintained till the First World War. The general principle adopted was that the number of Indian sepoys should not exceed twice that of the European troops. So Indian, okay, this is the thing. European troops were kept in key geographical and military positions. So the main positions, central positions were given to the European troops. To desist the Indian soldiers from rising again against the British rule, the sophisticated weapons and ammunition, the artillery, were never placed under the charge of Indians. So the main ammunitions were never given charge under the Indians. All Indian artillery units, with the exceptions of few mountain units, were disbanded. Discrimination on the basis of caste, religion and region was practiced in the recruitment to the army. In order to discourage nationalism, measures such as introduction of caste and community in most regiments were taken. Okay. Newspapers, journals, nationalist publications were prevented from reaching the soldiers to keep the Indian army separated from the life of the rest of the population. So, Indian army separated from the rest of the population. Economic exploitation. The uprising of 1857 ended the era of territorial expansion and ushered in the era of economic exploitation in the following manner. India was turned into a typical colonial economy, exporting raw materials and importing finished goods to Britain and other European countries. The salary and allowance of Secretary of State and members of India Council, the civil servant, the military officers were a large drain on the country's resources. Okay. Peasants were impoverished under the British rule. The indigo peasants of Bihar revolted on a large scale in 1866 to 1868. Rural artisan industries such as handicrafts, spinning and weaving collapsed. Indians had to pay heavy interest and dividends on the British capital invested in India. The British invested their surplus capital. Surplus means whatever they had extra money in railways, plantations, coal mines, jute mills, shipping, etc. Rise of nationalism. The uprising of 1857 was the first struggle of the Indian people for freedom from British imperialism. It paved the way for the rise of the national movement. The sacrifices made by Rani Lakshmibai, Nana Sahib and Mangal Pandey served as a source of inspiration for the future freedom fighters. The heroic struggle also established valuable traditions of resistance of the British rule. So these fighters gave the future fighters inspiration. Widening of the gulf between Hindus and Muslims. So whatever misunderstanding or barrier was there between the Hindus and the Muslims, those were removed. During the First War of Independence, both the Hindus and Muslims showed great enthusiasm and zeal to fight against the alien government. Now the British understood this. Now they will try to break the unity. But after the uprising, the gulf between the two communities widened. This was the consequence of the British policy of divide and rule, by which they sowed the seeds of dissension between the two communities. It was a deliberate attempt so that the two communities might never come together to pose a threat to the British rule in India. What happened in 1857 was that both the Muslims and the Hindus, they together rose up. Okay, so the British was very much frightened by it. So again they adopted one policy, that is divide and rule in 1905. What were the drawbacks of the First War? The movement did not have common plans of military action or a centralized leadership. Okay, because the effect, it was not so much effective. It was effective, but not so much. The uprisings, it was disorganized. The uprisings in different parts of the country were completely uncoordinated. Okay, the movement had no common goal before it except for the anti-foreign sentiments. There was no common goal. Only because it hurt personal sentiments, religious sentiments, people rose up. Okay. East India Company had the services of men of exceptional abilities like Lawrence, Nicholson, Havelock, Outram, Campbell, etc. They fought the toughest battles in the initial stage of the uprising and controlled the situation till reinforcements were received from abroad. Okay. The British Empire had far superior resource in terms of men, money and materials. So the Indians obviously could not rise over that. Movement did not have nationwide dimensions. It could not spread much to South India and most of Eastern or Western India. India has great stretches. Sindh and Rajasthan remained quiet. Nepal helped in the suppression of the movement. Bombay and Madras armies remained loyal to the British. So, within own country, enemy is there. So, what can be done? Some of the rulers of Indian states and the big zamindars, actually, it was also not their fault. They did for their own benefits, okay, so that they can enjoy the good amenities of the British rule, okay. Some sections of the Indian society were hostile to the uprising. For example, the money lenders and the big merchants of Mumbai, Kolkata and Chennai, whose main profits came from economic connections with the British merchants. So actually the British are levying heavy taxes on the Indian peasants. That's why they are able to lend money at high interests. Okay. Now if the British stop such activities, then who will do this? Besides, some zamindars of Bengal were loyal to the British. So they showed loyalty to the British. I don't know what they got. Some sections of educated Indians did not support the cause, as they had the wrong notion that the British rule would help them accomplish the task of modernization, which while those opposing the British government would take the country backwards. So some educated people are there who have only education but not far-sightedness. All people don't have that. We cannot blame that. The uprising was supposed to begin on May 31, 1857, but due to the greased cartridge incident, it began much before the fixed date. So the whole plan remained disorganized. So what was the nature of the war? See, historians and scholars have different views about the nature of the outbreak of 1857. Vinayak Damodar Savarkar, in his book The Indian War of Independence, described it as a planned war of national independence. Noted historian S.N. Sen also believes that the uprising of 1857 was a war of independence. According to him, the uprising began as a fight for religion and ended as a war of independence, as the revolutionaries wanted to get rid of the alien government and restore the old order of which the king of Delhi was a rightful representative. So they wanted their old ruler back. That is why they revolted. That was this view. Whatever be the nature of the uprising of 1857, it is generally hailed as the first war of independence because this is very important. It was the first mass uprising in which all the sections of Indian society participated against a common enemy, that is the British. It paved the way for the rise of modern national movement. So everyone by now had a fear of had a feeling of nationalism. Sorry, not fear, it is feeling of nationalism. A sense of nationalism awoke. The sacrifices made by Rani Lakshmibai, Nana Sahib and Mangal Pandey served as a source of inspiration to the leaders and people to fight for the independence of India from the British rule. So this is the chapter at a glance. Thank you.